Cherish the beauty of the human mind. Let's remember who's actually in control of these things. Let's be properly amazed and impressed. But let's also not attribute wisdom or knowledge to something that merely has information. Hello, and welcome to Thinking Out Loud. I'm your co-host, Nathan Rittenhouse.
And I'm your co-host, Cameron McAllister.
And today's episode is brought to you by ChatGPT, which means you have no clue whether or not what you're about to hear actually comes from Nathan and Cameron, or if an artificial intelligence language program produced this. Actually, no, you do know exactly who this is from. But we want to talk about it because in the future, maybe you won't know. And so, the future is opening up for us here. We're looking at a whole new form of technology, even to the degree that many people are speculating that this is the end of Google. And that is a shocking claim. If you come across a technology that might upend a institution in the modern era like Google, we probably should talk about it. So I can't wait to have this conversation with Cameron as two accidental Luddites sometimes, but we aren't really. I'm sure this could only get out of control in multiple fun ways. So, Cameron, well, first, okay, if you haven't been paying attention to any news source for the last 2 months, let me brief you on what ChatGPT is, and then Cameron will give you some funny stories of, and I guess we all chip in here on things that we've seen that are hilarious coming out of this, and then major concerns. So, imagine this. So, say you're typing an email in Google, like a Google email, and or you get you're responding to one, and you say, "Thanks. That sounds." What's the next word that pops into your mind there? That sounds great. That sounds good. I'll get back to you. You know, something like that. You like there's a feel to it. Like, what's that next word? And so essentially what Chat GPT is a open language, open AI platform that, for lack of a better term, has memorized half of the internet and then statistically guesses what the next word should be in a sentence, which you already see micro forms of that in like the autocomplete sections on your phone or in your email. However, what makes Chat GPT fascinating is it doesn't give you like yes or no answers. It can generate entire essays. So I was watching a video from the Wall Street Journal of a lady who asked it to write an essay. So, like, this is the level of complexity here. So it's like write an essay on existentialism, comparing Ferris Bueller's Day Off and Kafka's The Metamorphosis. And it did. It generated a long form essay to that degree of complexion or complexity almost instantaneously. And so this is a wild new era where through predictive and artificial intelligence learning, it can statistically produce things that sound true to humans. Cameron, you have some anecdotal thoughts here.
Well, first of all, I've long linked the metamorphosis to Ferris Bueller's Day Off, so I just feel ripped off right there. But
and
also,
existentialism, like that's your home turf right
that's
there.
that's my jam. And I've been told my entire life that I look like Cameron from Ferris Bueller's Day Off for Cameron Fry. And my name is Cameron. When people put those two things together, they just lose their ever living minds often. So there you go. I have a personal connection to that film. Beyond existentialism. Yeah, so I had two different friends get in touch with me within the course of 24 hours about this thing. Give me the name again. What's the name of this program?
Chat GPT, and I'll give you the GPT. It is. I wonder if the program came up with its own name for itself. So it stands for the GPT stands for Generative Pre-training Transformer. So Chat GPT.
Oh wow, that's a very felicitous phrase, isn't it? Generative
pre-training transformer.
Pre-training transformer. So one friend basically sent me the link and said, "All right, I just had this thing write me a paper on defending the divinity of Christ, and it produced a really well written defense of Christ's divinity." And you can't wrap your mind around the full implications of that, especially if you're a college professor or anybody who has to grade papers. But also, there are just whole, of course, job sectors and roles that may become obsolete. But there's a little bit of a hesitancy in me to go down that whole speculative road because I think there will be some drastic changes. There are drastic changes always do come with new technologies, but I think we're sometimes really we tend to jump to very strong conclusions about it, and we tend to overestimate our ability to predict what's going to happen. So I'm kind of in a position of wanting to hedge my bets here a little bit. I
Okay.
don't know. I'm
Uh,
still yeah. You think you have some stronger views on this though,
I
Nathan.
I think this is legitimately new territory. So here
Whoa.
and here yeah, and here's the reason why is that it and I was listening to a radio program about it, and an economics professor was pointing this out. It's not that the program is so smart; it's that humans aren't, and like we aren't cognitively ready to
Yeah.
process vast amounts of information with like so you can like it. So here are a couple examples of like things that I was reading about. Um, for example, if you ask it, how many bears has Russia sent to the moon? It'll say Russia has sent 53. Like this was an example. Russia has sent 53 bears to the moon. The first one was named Cosmos, born in 1963. The last one was named blah, 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 blah. It launched on this day. Like it doesn't say, I don't know. It just comes up with this crazy detailed, or somebody was writing, for example, like, why does an ice cube sink in water? And it gave a full, like, 3 paragraph scientific justification for why an ice cube sinks in water. Now,
Mhm.
all of us know ice cubes don't sink in water.
Right.
But if you set it
Yeah.
up like that, it has no clue what the words actually mean. Or another great one was, is a spoon fast? Why is a spoon faster than a turtle? And it'll generate back and say the average speed of a turtle is da 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 da. Da. It's one of the slower animals. Therefore, a spoon is faster than, and just like say it as direct fact in
Yep.
a narrative form with enough detail that most humans are not going to parse through, because actually we haven't been parsing through information online for a long time now to decide whether or not it's actually true or paid content. So we've been preconditioned to get ready to accept most of what this thing can generate, and it can do it super fast. Like, well, Jonathan Brush, who was on our show, he's on our board, was talking about a student of his who asked it the same essay question 3 times in a row, and it generated 3 entirely different essays.
Mhm.
So that's a different, and you can't fact check that for plagiarism because it's not copying and pasting from any place. It's legitimately new content
Mhm.
that you can't say, oh, well, this is a ripoff of that. No, it's put together in a totally new way. So yeah, okay. Do I think this is the end of the world? Absolutely not. Do I think it's a new frontier in misinformation, or the warping of information, or the reduction of information, or the control of information? Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that the intelligence involved here is the intelligence behind the scenes. This is that could be the subject of a separate podcast, but it's not the technology itself. It's the minds behind the technology that put this together in the first place. So I think
Mhm.
that's one operating assumption of mine, by the way. So this thing itself is doesn't lacks any what we would human. It has no intelligence that's comparable to human intelligence.
Correct. Yes,
So
and
yeah,
that's a very important very
it
well,
is.
except for here's the only place where there's a bit of a similarity. So, how does a child learn how to speak? We'll say English because that's what we're using right now. Um, is they're practicing with, and they're testing, and they're hearing, and they're trying to understand context. When does this word um you know this, Cameron? I'm sure your kids have like learned a new word, and then they're trying to find out how to use it properly in context. It's
Mhm.
great fun, right?
Oh, it's
But
great. Yeah.
essentially that's what this thing is doing, but it has access to the internet, but not the full.
Right.
So let's point out quickly too that there were two previous versions of this, and the first one started. What was the name of the first one? Tay, I think, that was launched, and it had access to Twitter, and the Twitter users trained it to be racist so fast that they had to shut the program down.
Mhm.
And then Meta launched a version of it, and it went like anti Mark Zuckerberg's really, really fast, like he creeps me out kind of stuff, that they
That
shut that
poor
one down
guy.
too. So the content that you feed into this thing is very, very important for what it actually, I'm using air quotes here when I say learn, but there are some
Mhm.
developmentally similar things where it's testing. And I would say
Yep.
there's not a chance that this thing doesn't become monetized, which means that everybody who's playing with it now is providing the information that it needs to become more accurate.
It'll absolutely be monetized, that's true. Yeah, and I don't know, maybe I'm splitting hairs here. I would say that it's not really I wouldn't use the word learn, it adapts,
Mhm. Yeah. Well,
possibly.
okay,
Yeah,
but
but that's again, that's another discussion probably about artificial intelligence itself. I know it has artificial in the title, but, yeah, I have some quibbles on
on
that.
the word learn, yeah. Well, and we will get into that whole like wisdom versus knowledge versus information kind of thing here in a minute, I'm sure. But the reason that I think this is different is you already see Microsoft coming out and saying all of our new products will have this embedded in them. And so
Yeah.
when a company like Microsoft says that, that's a you're going to have to get ready to think about how you want to use this if you do, and how what you read and what's generated online is processed. That's all I'm
You know,
saying.
one ver Yeah, no, and I think you're right there. We do need to think this through, and it's gonna hit us all on a very practical level. One thought that occurs to me here is, and I think I've mentioned this before over the years. I don't know if that I've mentioned this on the podcast, but there's been an insidious development in recent years, and it's been noted by a lot of social critics and thinkers. But the no, basically a tendency to outsource your thought, outsource your thinking.
Hmm.
Think of it as a Google Maps, but for just about most of your thinking, because it wastes time. You don't want to. Well, people think of it as wasting time, and so instead of, for instance, even something as that, for a while there were, I'm not making much sense here. For a while there were a number of articles that would have titles along the lines of, here's why you need to watch this, or here's what's wrong with this and why you shouldn't be doing this. But basically, very, very bald faced statements that had to do with, I'm here to make your mind up for you. And I've done all the thinking that needs to be done on this subject. I've parsed it through. And a lot of people are happy for that. Or even when somebody would they would know if they found out what line of work I was in, and they would ask me, "Oh, well, what's your take on this?" And basically give me the definitive answer, so I don't have to worry about this anymore. I understand some of the impulse there. This notion that you're going to save time, and that you'll be able to devote more of your thinking to what you want to, I suppose. But increasingly, people aren't willing to think at all, and so you're opening the doors wide for different levels of mental atrophy here. And
Well,
especially if students can't learn how to write a paper, and yeah, and can't really don't aren't willing to think in that way. That's a very specific way of thinking, when you have to put your thoughts down in writing and refine them and come up with sensible sentences, that
So
sort of thing.
yeah, so the experiment was done on whether or not Chat GPT could pass an AP literature class. And on the essay generation, it could. And it could maybe hang in there on some of the conversations, but there were times when it ran into books that it hadn't read that it was asked
Sure.
about and clearly didn't know. And even on the Ferris Bueller's Day Off essay that it wrote on existentialism, it like it got the quotes between from Cameron and Ferris mixed up sometimes. Like it wasn't
Sure.
100% on there. But what the teacher was saying is like, you have to embrace new technology. However, so he said, like, new technology doesn't concern me. What concerns me is that what all technology is ultimately doing is giving us access to easy.
Yeah.
And so
Right.
the thing is, do I read these two books or do I read this book, watch this movie, read this essay, and try to compare them, or do I say type this in Chat GPT and boom, there's my 1,200 word essay? So he sees it not as a technological problem, but and this is to the point you were saying about that's not good for humans. Like that's not good for your actual educational formation to have that much access to that much ease. academically.
Yes, and also, with all due respect, you do not have to embrace all new technologies. So I reserve the right to say I don't think, if something new comes along that I think threatens human thinking and, holistic thought, I'm happy to say, "Yeah, I don't think this is good. This
Okay,
is
well,
not
hang on.
great for you."
So, so here's all right. Let me just go like way out there, Cameron. Like, let's just go
Do it.
Nathan's hypothetical imagination to the extreme.
Launch into the stratosphere.
Okay, here we go. Brace yourself for the booster rockets. There's a sense in which, okay, so people have been saying this is the end of Google because Google is an ad-driven search engine. But if you can just ask ChatGPT the answer to something, and it's going to give you a very informed, theoretically, if you ask the right question, robust answer from the depths of the internet's collective data,
Hive mind. Yeah.
yeah, why would you go to Google to type that in? So that's why people are predicting the end of Google. But I would say, I don't actually think this is going to be happen, but it's fun to think about this being the end of the internet as an information source. So, say for
Mhm,
example that we have a blog that we intermittently get around to writing on, but we wanted to produce an article every single day. We
mhm.
can do that now. We could
Yep.
ChatGPT could produce an article for our blog. We could do 100 of them a day if we wanted it to. All we have to do is type in the question and copy and paste. And so, how then, like, what is the future of you knowing how this is like? So, okay, so all right,
Yep.
well, let's use America as an example. So, if you use ChatGPT right now and you say, write a racist far right blog about this topic, the first time it'll do it. But then if you go back, clearly somebody's behind the controls saying, no, we don't do that type of thing, or we don't
Mhm.
falsify election results. So there are controls based around it. But what some people are saying is these systems aren't that complicated once you know how to set them up. So
Mhm.
every single country could set up its own version of this that can completely control the content of what's shown to the citizens of its country. And
Not
so it,
terrifying at all.
well, no, so you were saying like, so my question is, you're saying, is this a limitation to human thinking, or what? How did you phrase it?
Yeah, basically, yeah, a
Inhibitor,
limitation to
but
human thinking, a
well,
liability when it comes to
might it not spin back around and become a massive, like, our critical thinking is going to have to skyrocket in order to navigate reality. So is there a sense in which, like, we've now come up against a worthy adversary, and for legitimate thinking and living, we're going to have to be far more discerning with our use of technology?
well, you can't
That'd be
out
a hopeful thought, but
that's good. Yeah, that's a hopeful thought. I mean, you can't out computer a computer. And we keep making the mistake of thinking of a human mind in terms of a computer. We have a very mechanistic understanding of the way
we
we
don't know how
operate.
consciousness works. So how are we going to produce an artificial consciousness?
Right. Right. And so consciousness itself is one of the greatest mysteries to I mean, by broad consensus. And in fact, you have a hardened skeptic like Thomas Nagel, who taught at New York University, professor of philosophy, but who basically thought consciousness is the game changer. He wrote that in his book Mind and Cosmos, makes the case that consciousness breaks the materialistic neo-Darwinian understanding of the world because it presents insuperable challenges to it. So yeah, consciousness is so rich, and the way I mean, our minds do things that we just simply can scarcely take account of it. Another really great writer on this subject actually is the ever wonderful, ever curmudgeonly David Bentley Hart. He writes about it at length in his book, The Experience of God. But
Okay, wait, hang on. Time
we're
out. Time
going to
out.
yeah,
Let me just say
yeah,
this though.
time out.
The percentage of people who are formed by David Bentley Hart compared to the percentage of people who are systematically raised on TikTok,
Sure.
those are
No, I'm just
two,
saying.
like, your willingness to swallow content is very, very different depending on the
Oh yeah, no, and
preconditions at play here.
all I'm doing is saying that don't take for granted the wonder of your mind. It is it is unfathomably more amazing than any computer ever produced by
And
a
I'm
human.
agreeing
Well,
with that,
how are
but
the
I'm saying most people totally take it for
no,
granted
and
and
that's
don't
where I'm
use it.
saying just you don't have to read David Bentley Hart to parse that. I mean, think about this. Who makes all these supercomputers? We make them. One of the aspects that gets overlooked in these conversations, I don't think it's happening here, but we talk about these technologies that are paradigm shifting, game changers. Oh my goodness, how is this just changes everything? I mean, how are humans going to compete? Who made the thing in the first place? Yeah, I mean, we do have stories like Frankenstein about the modern Prometheus and how our, you know, the things that we make get out of control very quickly, or the what is it, the Sorcerer's Apprentice, these kinds of stories, and that's true, absolutely. Our technology, our the stuff that we make. I very careful with my language here sometimes, Nathan. I don't like to say our creation. We don't create in the sense that God
Our,
creates. So I
our
don't even like to say that
reorganization.
we. Yeah, right. We're sub creators, right? Yeah, our reorganization of the basic parts of the world we inherit, but gets out of hand all the time. But it's still the
But
the
because we want
marvel
it to.
behind this,
We want it
because we
to.
want it to. Yeah, yeah.
That's the biggest issue is we want it.
But the marvel behind this stuff are the minds that produced it. And
Sure.
that gets lost in this conversation sometimes. But yes, will this I mean, the other big danger here, you've mentioned it already, is we misinformation is becoming more and more of a problem, and especially the the level of sophistication when it comes to propaganda these days is just off the charts. And so the possibilities for, I mean, think about somebody like a Vladimir Putin using technology like this. I mean, it really is quite unsettling. But yes, I mean, a lot remains to be seen. I'm hesitant to go down, some kind of a road where I offer a detailed
What?
summary
Yes.
or prognosis.
Well, let me throw one more thing in here. It probably won't be one more
Yeah.
thing, but let me humor myself by thinking it'll be one more thing. Um, so there's this. I got this. I have this little cedar. It's called a 4-row pinpoint cedar for planting little lettuce seeds in nice straight rows. When you get this thing, the guy who invented it has a little philosophical treatise that goes along with it that delineates between a tool and a machine. And he says this thing is a tool, and a tool depends on the skill of the operator to produce the proper outcome. And a machine always gets the exact same result. And so I
Right.
think
Yeah.
so is your computer, is your phone, is it a tool or is it a machine? And if it's a tool, then it can be used to cultivate and capture and accentuate the skills and gifts and abilities that you already have. And that's one thing. It almost seems that some like because language is such an essential element of like God speaks reality into being, this idea of the word, like there's a rich theological connection between the complexity of what it means to be human and our relationship to language. So it seems like when we start monkeying with that, maybe we're moving into the machine category in a sense in which the outcomes of this are not actually based on legitimate human capacities and capabilities, but it's a machine that allows us to fake results to promote us into positions of things we don't even know what we're talking about.
Yeah, and here's the truth. Can you use this thing to, I mean, there are multiple ways this kind of technology could also be an aid, but there are multiple ways it could be abused. So say you're a student and you use it to, cheat essentially. I mean, in the end, who's the person who gets hurt?
Oh,
I
yeah.
mean, I mean, of course, this you do. If you're doing that, first of all, they're on a number of different levels. But also, if let's say if you if you find ways to cheat your way through great institutions or into an excellent job, what will you do when you find yourself in a role where you have no actual skills? Your skills are all in basically different forms of deception, but you don't really have the
I'm
requisite
holding
skills
back
to
on any
do the
political
job.
jokes at this point when you say that. So,
I know, of course.
yeah.
But I mean, you're I think this is also another practical takeaway from this, and I have been saying this for a while, is we need to learn to slow down and stop treating ourselves like machines as well,
Mhm.
or like tools. Because I mean, again, this the whole habit of looking at it's fine to want to be productive and get a lot of stuff done, by the way. I mean, I think there's nothing wrong with crossing off to-do lists and optimizing your schedule and all that's all fine. But there is a fine line between doing that and then starting to look at yourself almost in a very mechanistic sense. And you go down this road of trying to essentially optimize everything, and you're not able to be fully human. You are still a person, and part of computers are really, really, really fast. They're not necessarily, like you said, they're sometimes they can sift information way more quickly than we can, but we can go to depths that are not available to machines. We can, and this is where wisdom and discernment come in. But again, there has to be a willingness to slow down. There has to be a willingness to see yourself as a person rather than as some sort of a mechanism. And I think,
Mhm.
yeah, our opportunities to do that are going to be, they're only increasing right now.
Yeah, but okay, so I had this thought. Okay, so see, I'm past one more thought already. But what, like, so I was talking to a high school senior. He was over at our house last night eating waffles. And we were saying, like, is the future of this coming down to this is going to be the only way that you can know somebody is to sit down and eat with them and know what they're really like? Because let's
Well,
face it, you and I produced over 3,500 minutes of content on this podcast last year. All you would need to do is upload that, and it could pretty easily generate content using our voice. Even we could probably make a podcast that doesn't even have any, you and
hmm
I involved in it. Um, so the future, I think, is actually, I think some everybody that I've read or looked at an article on Chat GPT has looked at it and been like, wow, this is amazing. And then is about 45 seconds out from saying, and this is terrifying. And so, like, is this pushing a new boundary where it might generate some really healthy introspection on exactly the kinds of things that you've been speaking about? And the fact I was thinking about this in terms of the future of churches, like churches that try to compete with the internet are going to lose. So, what is it that your congregation offers people that Chat GPT doesn't?
hmm
And like, don't just haha and think over that. Like, think through that, because that's what you're up against. If it's just information, Chat GPT is going to smoke your preacher on
hmm
Bible facts and arguments for the divinity of Christ and eloquency. I mean, people are writing, yeah, like, and do it in the tone of Shakespeare. You can give the thing a command of like the style that you want it in. So if it's producing information that you seek, that's not a competitive era or area for spiritual growth and development. So, and I think there are real answers to that, by the way. And that's why some churches are really doing well. But I don't know. It's helpful for me to think through it in those categories of like which churches are trying to compete with the internet and which ones are specializing in the things that the internet can't provide, and that culture can't provide. Uh, that's there's some growth that comes out of that.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I mean this is a new frontier. So we're at the very beginning of what will
Oh, it's
develop
a baby
into.
program. Yeah, it's
Oh
just
yeah.
learning. It's a
Yeah,
toddler.
so I mean we're at the very yeah, these are the early stages of what will become an increasingly interesting conversation. And yeah, I think I don't have too much more to say on this subject right now because I'm still I sense in myself a tendency to be a little bit more dismissive here, but I think that that might not be quite right. I'm also my general read is that one of a very important way to kind of redress, seek redress here would be to again lean into the humanities and some of the great works down the ages. This is just a very Cameron thing to say. And how about instead of in the style of Shakespeare, why not read some Shakespeare and why not, learn some of the beautiful turns of phrase that have I don't know, that have made a big difference in the world. It just
See,
it's a
the
great
reason
way
is
I
you're a
mean to
liberal
lean
arts
into
major,
yeah.
Cameron. You went to a liberal arts college. And and
And
and
part
we are
of
in a
yeah,
culture
that's
that is
true.
hardwired for pragmatism and
Mhm.
high-speed functionality through digital means. So I'm
Right,
right there
right.
with you. I'd like to sit on a stump and read a real book that's made out of paper and write. notes in the margin with a pencil. And because I think that's best and it's pleasurable to me. But I
Well, it's
don't
not just that but it has a but I guess what I'm trying to say is it's practical as well. But you have to understand practical in a more expansive sense. I mean, it's practical in the sense that this teaches you how to think, and it teaches you how to th- it teaches you how to think along with the great minds down the ages. And that is something that is truly valuable and will make a serious difference. For a while, there were a number of articles highlighting the fact that even places like Google, which may soon be obsolete, who knows, but even places like Google
they won't be.
were trying
They're
to
way in on this.
they won't. No, they won't.
Yeah.
But they were trying to recruit humanities majors because we've talked about this before. They had a lot of really technically competent people who were brilliant in their fields, great at coding, but who were really lousy at independent thinking, really lousy at really communicating, actually. They had the know-how, they had the technical know-how. They were really bad at relaying that to to a team of engineers, for
See,
instance,
but now
or
ChatGPT will do
explaining
it
it to
for him,
somebody
so
else.
they solve the problem.
Maybe sometimes, but you can't always outsource everything to that because sometimes you still have to deal with human beings and still have to talk. And if you have a really low level of articulacy, you, I think you do see some signs of, I would say, dwindling focus, dwindling articulacy. You know, the, that those are all areas that can be improved with slowing down, concentrated, careful reading, liberal arts emphasis. You don't have to be a liberal arts major, but some of those liberal arts habits can practically really help you in those areas and improve you in those areas. But I rest my case. That's
I think your case
well,
is accurate. I think also that a program that can find an error in 1,000 lines of code instantly is extremely helpful.
mhm,
I think this will
sure,
replace the chat bot when you're trying to renew your credit card and it takes you 45 minutes on hold with 6 different people. Um, it
definitely,
will provide conveniences that will make us want to adopt it. When I say we, I'm speaking broadly as humans
sure,
here.
yep.
Um, so my goal in life is to live a life that's interesting enough and nonconformist enough that Chat GPT can't figure me out. So game on, Chat GPT.
Oh, I love it.
Let's see if you can figure out the algorithm of reproducing Nathan. And I really hope that one of our listeners gets Chat GPT to write a response to this podcast. But that'll just be interesting. Go for it. Well, I don't know that we sorted anything out other than to say cherish the beauty of the human mind. Let's remember who's actually in control of these things. Let's be properly amazed and impressed. But let's also not attribute wisdom or knowledge to something that merely has information. And let's think about what it means to live a fully human, fully embodied life, to delight in our consciousness, the complexity of what it means to be human, the humanities and the rich questions of the past. You do not want an algorithm to write a vision statement for your life. Um,
No.
there are things that you need to sort out on your own there. But this will come back up. It'll be fun. But this is a little bit of a introduction into that category of why we are. I'm optimistic for humanity in the future of really good human relationships. That is a real category and really will happen. And this will either be a disruptor of that, but it might
Mm.
also be an instigator of that. So time will tell. You've been listening to Thinking Out Loud, podcast where we think out loud about current events and Christian hope, and we'll leave it up to you to decide whether or not we actually said any of this.
Thanks for listening to Thinking Out Loud. If you'd like to learn more about what we do, book Nathan or Cameron, or if you'd like to support us financially, whether through a one-time donation or on a monthly basis, you can do so on the donate page at www.toltogether.com. That's toltogether.com. And please consider leaving us a 5-star rating and sharing this content with your friends. It really does help.